Kia ora and welcome to Mana Talanoa, and in this session it's our Wahine Toa Women in Sport. It's Andre Whitaker here, and it's my pleasure to be speaking to two sisters actually who've been very successful in their sports careers, playing hockey for the Black Sticks, and one of them going to the Olympic Games. So it'll be a really fascinating kōrero that we'll have this morning. So welcome, kia ora kōrua to Niniwa and Aniwaka Roberts. Kia ora.
Hello, Andre.
Lovely to have you both here. Look, you've got a fascinating, both of you, fascinating career in hockey, which we'll talk about. But with your names, Niniwa and Aniwaka, beautiful names. It'd be interesting to know the heritage, perhaps behind those names, and the whakapapa of your family. I'll hand over to one of you to talk about that.
Yeah. Hi, morena everybody, and just we'll start with our whakapapa. So, ko tārahi te maunga, ko Wahine Mataro te awa, ko nāhina te marae, ko tūhoi te iwi. Ko Aniwaka tuku ingoa, he ingoa tēnei no tūhoi, he wahine toa, te wahine mō tuku ingoa. So just my name in particular is a name from the Tūhoi tribe, who my mum took off a beautiful lady, also Aniwaka, and decided that was a good name. There is no meaning behind the name. It's just a name that I've always grown up knowing that it's just come from a really special lady who only three of us actually have the name. So I feel very privileged to have the name. But now I also have passed my name down to one of my cousins' babies, little baby girls. So yeah, that's my name.
And Niniwa is a name also of Tūhoi descent, and comes from one of my actually a lady who went to school with my mother, and my mother went to Raiatoki High School, and so she went to the same school as her, and she liked that name and passed that name on to me. My understanding that is my name means lighthearted, and I guess we're both blessed with beautiful names.
Yeah, and so with that background, so mum's from Tūhoi, so dad's from that way as well, or whereabouts are they both from?
Dad is born and bred mainlander. He's from the Central Otago region, specifically Bannockburn and Cromwell, and so kind of opposite ends of the spectrum, to be fair. My dad grew up on a farm, which is now a vineyard, which I'm surprised he didn't stay down in, to be fair, because we'd been living the life down in Queenstown, and mum grew up on a farm up in Raiatoki, so yeah.
Look, fantastic. Well, Central Otago, Pinot it's well known for in that region, so
for sure.
Maybe you can still go back and see those vineyards. So in terms of growing up, whereabouts did you both start off? Where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Ruatoki, or were you down here in Wellington? How did that happen?
I guess I'll start. I actually was born in Takapuna in Auckland. So mum and dad were both in the services in the Air Force. And so born in Takapuna, and then when I was 2 years old, moved across to Singapore and lived in Singapore for 2 years. So when we came back, dad was transferred down to Wellington and bought a house in Wainuiomata, where they've lived now for 41 years. So did most of my growing up in Wainuiomata. Mum and dad sent me away for school back to Raiatoki, which I lasted a term. So my reo is not as good as my beautiful sisters. And then I came home, did the rest of my schooling through Wainuiomata College, and then went to Wellington East Girls. So yeah.
Yeah. And so I was born in Lower Hutt along with my twin sister. And then we actually did kohanga reo here, and then we jetted off with mum and my brother to Ruatoki and went to Te Kurakapu Māori o Ruatoki for 3 to 4 years. Then journeyed back down here to attend local Wainuiomata primary school, and then intermediate, and then we ended up at Wellington East Girls as well.
Congratulations with your reo, both of you. For you, Ani, you sounded really fluent, and so how much is te reo or tikanga kaupapa Māori part of your day-to-day life now, or what you do with your family?
So probably lost it for a little bit after my high school years. now having kids, who my daughter attends a kohanga reo, has kind of brought the reo Māori and te ao Māori back into my life quite heavily, along with my partner as well, who is from Te Arawa. So really involved in te ao Māori and our tikanga o te reo Māori in our day-to-day lives, and also just handing that off to our tamariki, really, because it's really special for us that they know where they come from, and have a good understanding and be able to speak te reo when they need to.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to talk about that. I was looking through and doing some research on both of your backgrounds, and I saw for you, Niniwa, there was a bit in there about tikanga and kaupapa Māori values that help support you in your journey through sport as well. So, you know, it'd be interesting to talk about that. So as far as for you and your family, tikanga and kaupapa Māori, what part does that play?
Probably not as much as my sisters. I suppose we are quite blessed to have a mum who is fluent in te reo and is teachers at Wainui High School, and so she's a kaiarahi te reo there, and you know, I guess the difference for me is when Ani and my brother and my other sister went back home, they went home with mum. So my journey was a little bit different. I went and lasted a term, but as I said, mum still speaks te reo Māori to our kids, to all of her mokos. So we're really lucky. And I guess the mahi that I'm involved in now allows me to be able to utilise that as well. And I'm still on my journey of trying to probably get back on my journey of learning te reo Māori, and but it's certainly involved in my work quite heavily, and also anytime I'm around my family.
Fabulous, really, really good to hear. So moving on to sport, you know, was hockey the sport that you've always been involved with, or, you know, did you start off playing hockey back in Wainuiomata? And tell us about that journey from sport and then, you know, playing hockey.
I'll start, sis. Sorry. I guess I played hockey because mum played hockey. So and we grew up, because we grew up in Wainui. We played for the Wainuiomata Hockey Club, which was only a small hockey club, small community. And mum played for a team called Mum's Army, and so we'd follow. It was only me for 9 years, so I'd follow her around to all these games. And I guess I just got soaked up in that kind of club atmosphere and played. So, I was reminiscing with my kids the other day saying, I used to wear boots and go out when it was frosty and freezing in those grass fields. And, they play on this lovely AstroTurf now. So I guess that's why I probably started playing, was because mum played. But I was really lucky. Wainui is a fabulous community for sports. So I was able to play a number of different sports. So I was, swimming, touch, softball, all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think for me, I was a netballer, believe it or not. Starting in the Bay of Plenty, and up there, I kind of loved it. Didn't really know about hockey. Didn't really kind of grasp it until we moved back to Wellington, and then I didn't make a netball rep team, and I was like, I don't want to play this sport anymore. Went along to watching him play, and I was like, I want to play that sport. So once I decided that was me. And then I've just kind of stuck to it. Did a bit of swimming because my twin sister did it. So then I had to choose.
No, look, as we were kind of talking about offline before we came on, I first met you two by chance at a touch game through a mutual friend of ours, Joel Baker, and you came along and played touch. And one of the things you could see is that when you're playing a field sport, say, that involves a ball and passing and positioning, some of those skills are transferable. And certainly your what appeared to me at the time was your sense of space, timing and positioning was obviously very clear. And I went to Joel, who are those two? And they play for the Black Sticks. Wow, yeah, that really showed out. So Nin, you're obviously the older sister that led things off in playing hockey. So coming through Wainuiomata, tell us about the journey there. You would have gone on to playing club level, reps, into the Black Ferns. I understand you did some international travel to sort of have a look at the playing hockey overseas. Yeah, talk us through your sort of stepping through the playing journey as a player. Yeah.
I guess, as I said, the community for me growing up in Wainuiomata was really strong. It was a really family-orientated community, and so, there was probably when I was going through club stuff from a junior level, there was 6 or 7 of us that were in rep teams. And so we went through kind of age group rep teams together. So there was a lot of carpooling and I don't know, all those kind of doing raffles to get us all to these tournaments. And then I got to 16 and the club level I was playing probably wasn't as strong enough as I needed to be playing. So I stepped over to the Hut and played for Hut Hockey Club. And, at the age of 15, 16, I was playing Premier 1 women's hockey. And I guess my progression kept going. I had my first New Zealand trial when I was 18, which, and this sounds probably, I was quite naive, I suppose, growing up as a hockey player. I didn't really know, I didn't have any ambitions or aspirations to make New Zealand teams. I just loved playing the sport. I loved the friends that I had in the sport. And so when I got to this trial, and back then they brought everyone to Wellington, and it was kind of split up into 4 different regions, and I was in the central region team. I was kind of in awe of all these hockey players that were around me. So it was people like Mandy Barker, or Mandy Smith back then, Anna Lawrence, all these old legends, Tina Belkaki, and I just was like, whoa, how did I get here? I went to age group under 18 trials, and again, I distinctly remember with my roommates that we had to write down what our goals were, and I said to her, what did you write down? She goes, I want to make the New Zealand team. I went, oh, okay. So I wrote that down. I guess I just never thought I would get there. So had my first trial at 18, but didn't make the New Zealand team till I was 24. So I did a lot of learning in those 6 years. And I think part of that was my journey through, I went and watched the Olympics in 2000 and in Sydney. And it was a real eye-opener for me because one of my best friends was playing in that team. And I saw the highs and lows of what they went through in that tournament, but also saw the skills that were required and how fit they were. And I sat there going, I guess I'd got by on getting into a number of teams just through natural talent, but hadn't actually realised what I needed to do to get in there. And it was actually just doing the hard yards. So I was fortunate. My partner at the time had got a job in Germany, so moved to Germany, lived there for 6 months, played hockey over there. Then we moved to Amsterdam in Holland, and in my I got lost one day biking around Amsterdam and came across this club which had 3 turfs, which was unheard of in New Zealand. Right now it's not, but back then it was. And this was in 2000. It was end of 2000, and I walked into this club and said, oh, hey, I'm from New Zealand, I wouldn't mind playing. So Anna Lawrence, who currently was the New Zealand captain at the time, had just finished playing there, and they said, oh, come along and play. And my team were 8 Olympic silver medalists. Wow. And I just was like, I was blown away. And just their standard of hockey, the type of training they did was a massive eye-opener for me, which then changed, I think, the direction of where I was going as a hockey player. So I came back and at 2001 trialled, made the team, and then I guess my career took off after that, and I was in the team through to the end of 2008.
Well, we'll talk a bit about, progressing into the Commonwealth Games and the Olympics, but you mentioned a step up in the kind of training environment when you're over in Germany and the Netherlands. What were the kinds of things that were different to your experience back home?
Well, I guess their club setup is probably similar to what our regional setup is, which is a difference in itself, right? So we had a trainer, we'd have our own fitness trainer who would train us 3 times a week, and that would consist of running through forests, but doing speed and endurance work. And then we'd have 2 hockey sessions. After each hockey session, we would go back to our club, have showers, and a meal would be put on for us. So everything was set up for you as a player. You didn't have to think about anything apart from playing the sport, which was just unheard of here, very amateur. So the professional setup was incredible. And this is club level. And then we'd have, at any club game, we'd have a whole grandstand full of people coming to watch us play, because the hockey was so highly, I guess, engaged and popular over there for families. I guess that it was just a step up into that kind of semi-professional space.
No, great to hear. And look, be good to, we'll loop back around and talk about what it's like to have that community, crowd support and the environment. So Ani, you're watching your older sister play hockey, going overseas. So what was the motivation, inspiration for you to get to where you did in the sport?
Yeah, I think I was very fortunate to have a role model like my older sister. You know, like watching her achieve all these things, I was like, oh, I want to do that too. Like, how do I do that? But as Min talked about, I mean, naturally, I was a little bit gifted with the hockey stick, and you know, I also made age group teams, but never quite made team. You know, the actual teams for New Zealand. It wasn't till 23 I made the Black Sticks, and I had no age group New Zealand team against my name. But I think it got to a point for me as well where I had the natural talent, but I needed to do the extra yards and all the other stuff, and I had to learn the hard way by actually going and watching in at Beijing to be like, man, she worked so hard to get there. That's what I need to do. And then once I added that to my training regime, then my opportunity came. So, but also taking a trip, I also went over to Germany for 6 months. It kind of feels like I'm telling the same story as Nin, just 13 years later.
Yeah.
And kind of went on my own journey before I made New Zealand, to kind of change my hockey a little bit, add a little bit more some skill sets to my game that I didn't have before, that I was like, wow, now I'm a better hockey player. Just an eye-opener to the different structures that they played over there. And actually being in a foreign country where you don't even know how to speak the language made you kind of, I've got to work a little bit harder here because I actually don't know what they're saying. So that also, I guess, for me personally, helped me understand the game of hockey on a different level, because you can just look and watch and play hockey and know how to receive and trap and pass, but there's a little part of it that's like, you just got to understand the whole game and see things that other people don't see. And I think going overseas and being put in that position kind of was a big eye-opener for me, and I was only 20, 21 doing this, but really enjoyed it.
One of the things I've found from talking to other athletes who, like yourself, head overseas when they're young is feel like they miss home. You know, like one thing you're saying, there's the language and obviously food, the environment, the weather, a lot of things are different. How was that for you, for either of you, being away from New Zealand at a young age? You're both like away from, you know, from places like Ruatoki, from Wainuamata, and then you're in the Netherlands and Germany. What were kind of your things that keep you grounded while you're away from your, you know, because you grew up with a strong kaupapa whānau tikanga. What was it like when you're overseas? How did you keep that sort of sense of being grounded while you're away?
Oh, you go.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I think we're really lucky when I went that, you know, technology was kind of on my side, and we had things like Skype, and, you know, Facebook had just started. So, you know, we got to be able to talk to whānau all the time. But then also fortunate that my partner could actually come over and spend that time with me as well and kind of break up the trip so I wasn't on my own all the time. And I travelled with another New Zealand hockey player. So I wasn't on my own fully. She became my like German whānau along with 2 Canadian hockey players who I lived with. So that actually made it easier knowing that there were other people going through the same sacrifice as I was, not being with their family. So that's how I got through it.
Yeah, there was no technology when I was over living in Holland. My phone bills were horrendous because I was a bit of a sook, to be honest. I'd phone mum all the time and she goes, well, you chose to move over there, bub. So I guess that was my grounding. Mum kind of, I guess, keeping it real for me. But I think just knowing that I could always phone her and I think phone her whenever I needed her, but also it meant that I had to move outside my comfort zone, right, and find people that I could relate to that would soon become lifelong friends when you're in that space. So I was really lucky when I lived in Amsterdam. I didn't have to work, so you know, I went on the hunt to find friends that I could, and it was generally my teammates, but I ended up making friends with an American girl from a different team, and so her and I, because she wasn't working as well, just hung out all day every day, and just made our way around Holland, really. Yeah,
and for you, Nin, you know, you from that international experience, debuting for the Black Sticks, you went to the Commonwealth Games in Manchester, and then later from there, the Olympics in Athens. So tell us about that, you know, going to that big stage, you know, from playing at Brian Heath Park, you know, and then you're at the Olympics.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be good to share with us, that journey, being out there on the Olympic stage. And, New Zealand in terms of hockey has, going way back to 1976 when they won the gold medal. And, Peter Muskimmin, the head of Sport New Zealand, was part of that. And, names that rang out for me later on that came through in hockey in the men's anyway, like Peter Darju, for example. And then now later with the likes of Jimmy McCaw. So hockey is coming more and more into the frame, and we've got some good history. But then being at the Olympic Games, being part of an Olympic build-up squad, tell us about that journey and what that's like.
Yeah, I guess so. When it comes to campaign time, certainly in and around the Commonwealth Games and Olympics, our team's centralised. So that in itself is I guess, an interesting space. So I moved to Christchurch for 6 months. Because the coach at the time lived in Christchurch, so the whole team moved down there. And then once the team was announced, we ended up being away for 6 weeks. Yeah. So we based ourselves, prior to the Olympics in Athens, we based ourselves in Germany. And we in this sleepy little town called Bad Neuenahr, which was a retirement village, to be fair, and we were like the highlight of their lives in that little town, and they kind of embraced us anyway. But what we did there is we spent 3.5 weeks training and preparing for the Olympics, and it was, we had to get used to the heat, so that's why we'd centralised in the middle of Germany, because the temperatures we were playing in were kind of 35 to 40 degrees, and we knew that that's what it was going to be like when we went to Athens, and so and we played against the German team kind of every other week. Again, that's something that we never had, being so isolated, being in New Zealand, being able to play European teams. And so going into the Olympic Village, to be fair, it was quite surreal until you actually got in there. And the Olympic Games is probably unlike anything else in the world. It's you are in a contained village, basically, where in the village there are kind of 15,000 athletes living. And, simple things like a food hall, which is the size of probably 3 or 4 rugby fields, one of them, where everyone eats. Is just mind-boggling. They've got their own hair salon, they've got their own bank, they've got their own post office, so everything that you can think of is within this village, and everything is free. So again, another concept that you're just not used to. But Athens in itself, going home to the home of the Olympics, was pretty phenomenal. Just as soon as you even arrived, just being around all that heritage and history of the Olympic Games was incredible. And so going in there, what was interesting though was going into that village, it wasn't ready. And so they were still laying down grass and, still making the velodrome. We were fortunate because the hockey turf had to be laid down quite early. So our area was beautiful. And we were an hour's drive from the village. And so we drove basically along this coastline of Athens. And it was just beautiful. You just couldn't imagine anything more beautiful. And I guess you don't realize actually that whilst you're one of 16 in a team, you're actually one of probably 100 athletes. So you become part of this wider New Zealand team, and that was the first time that actually introduced kaupapa Māori and the alignment to the heritage of, I guess, back in Athens, it was aligned to World War II. And so we had Amster Reedy as our kaumātua for that trip.
Fantastic,
and Naita, who had provided us a tohu, or the pounamu, that travelled with us, which continues to travel with all Olympic and Commonwealth teams. So that I think for me, that was really grounding in itself, because it felt like I had a sense of home there. And to be poor Amster, I probably sat with them most days going, hey, I just want to ask you this question. And it was just really nice to have that, that feeling like someone was there for you outside of your team. So, but incredible experience. And I went to the 2008 Olympics as well. And I guess if I compare the two, probably, 2004 was certainly from an experience point of view and a playing point of view was probably the best campaign that I'd done. But 2008 was special for me because I had, my oldest daughter was there at 18 months old, and then my sister, my brother-in-law and my husband were there as well. So quite a different experience again.
Well, you touched on a few things there. One, that whole international experience and being in Athens and the history, and, really pleasing to hear the kaupapa and whanaungatanga element that, by the sounds of it, was brought into that entire team of 100. Yeah. And, you must have been incredibly proud as someone of Ngāi Tūhoi, being able to feel that kaupapa Māori there in the team. Yeah. And I'll come back around, and you mentioned a couple of other things about, you had your family there. So, having families along the way present challenges for, in particular for women and competing at high level sport. So I will come back to that. But over to you, Ani. We talked earlier before we came on that, you were in the Commonwealth Games squad, and then, had a couple of hiccups along the way in terms of health, but you managed to bounce back from. So it'd be good to talk about your entering that big arena in terms of the Black Sticks, and you talked about the home series here against India in Wellington. So be nice to have a little chat about that.
Yeah, so obviously very special to have my first debut here in New Zealand. Loved it that it was in Hawke's Bay too, because it wasn't far from Wellington, so Mum drove up, which was nice. The whole experience, I was kind of like, I just still couldn't believe it on the day that I was given my first shirt by another Wellingtonian, I guess Nelson born, but Anita Punt, who gave me my shirt. Just kind of went out there playing in a position that I'd actually never played in before, because I was generally a midfielder, but now I'm this fullback for New Zealand, thrown in the deep end, but just kind of embraced it and just played, have no fear, just play what's in front of me, do my best, and I just loved it. Had a good game, I thought, but then came to Wellington, and I think I had more nerves playing that game because I was in front of more people who have supported me. Who have supported me through my hockey years, and so I just had to kind of stay calm, stay focused, and I don't know what I enjoyed with my debut or playing in Wellington, because then my dad was there and I just got critique after critique when I got off the field. So yeah, I mean, I love my mum and dad, but and it's good to get that critique sometimes. I was like, can you just give me a hug? I just played for New Zealand. It got easier, but then there were always tough games where, when you play the Dutch and things like that, it's like your nerve levels are up the roof, and you just don't even know how to control it, and you've got players who just can turn you inside out like you're a cone. So but the experience itself was next to none, really, but when you're playing against people like that.
Yeah, baby's all good. But you went on to Argentina after that, then that was another big stage that you went to. What was that like?
Yeah, so Argentina is an incredible place to play in, and you think home crowds here are bigger, than you go over there and they're like double the size and just super loud. But you're also playing against someone that you idolize. You're playing against Luciana Aymar, who is one of the best hockey players in the world. And after the game, you're asking her to sign your top because you're still an idol, regardless of just playing against her. So I really loved the experience. And we used to travel there in my time in the Black Sticks. We played there quite a bit. Every year we would travel there twice a year. So you get used to it. But that team is so talented. It didn't matter if you did your homework against them or they came out with something new, but loved playing over there. And excuse me. Yeah.
All good.
Yeah, I remember playing over in Argentina as well for a Champions Trophy, and it was they had this cage around the turf. When I say cage, it was just high netting, and when you'd play against the Argentinians, they would shake the cage, and honestly, the atmosphere was incredible.
Yeah. Look, we've just talked about huge international experiences in hockey. So coming back here to New Zealand, to Aotearoa, the New Zealand Māori women's hockey setup. I'm just reading a little bit about that. talk to us about that that setup and what involvement you might have with it or have had in the past.
Yeah, I guess it's varied really. I was involved when Māori hockey first started. So I guess the woman who drove Māori hockey in New Zealand was a beautiful wahine called Mākiha. So from the Hawke's Bay. So I guess the catchment that we fall into is the Takitimu Waka, and so she was part of that area, and so the first ever Māori women's hockey team tournament was played in Hawke's Bay. And I played in that, and I probably played Māori hockey for 4 or 5 years, and then Ani started playing as well. And then I guess I took a break from it. What I guess I love about Māori hockey is that it's always played in Labour Weekend, and it's a chance for you to just play hockey, not be structured, not be like, and it shows you some of the raw talent that Māori have out there, and it's really awesome to see. I then, I guess because I had my kids, and on Labour Weekend we always wanted to not play hockey because you're kind of just coming out of a winter season, but Ani's been more probably heavily involved in it for the last 10-15 years, so you can probably speak to that a bit more, sis.
Yeah. Oh, look, I enjoy Māori hockey. I think it kind of grounds me again as to why I play the sport, and it's not only the playing hockey while you go there, it's actually the people and actually the pō whakangaho, where we all get to sing a waiata to each other and kind of embrace the culture fully, and just it's so beautiful, and probably one of the reasons why I go back there, because you see people who it's the one time of the year you get to catch up with them and actually catch up with them, and have a good laugh, but also play the game that you all love. And as I said, it keeps me grounded, and this is why I play hockey. It's because you want to go to these tournaments and you want to just play with your friends, regardless of at what level it is. And actually Māori hockey of recent times has just kind of been the level of hockey is higher and higher and higher, and we've got more talent than we think that's out there. It's just following they just need a bit of a push in the right direction, and that natural talent can get you this far, and they just need the education piece of this is what you've actually got to do to get to the next step, which I think is starting to come into Māori hockey with all the role models that we have around.
That's fantastic to see. And who are some of the maybe up-and-coming Māori hockey players that are around that you're seeing or noticing? Any that stand out in particular that you can see have got a potential in future to go further?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess recently we a year, like 2 Māori hockeys ago, we had Kiriwara Hunter, who's actually from Wainui, who was named under 21 New Zealand Māori Player of the Year. And now they offer a scholarship for her to go and do some education. So she's an up-and-coming player locally as well. Obviously, starting to hit the Black Sticks frame, and so it would be really cool to see her kind of go all the way. There are also other Māori hockey athletes around New Zealand who I think have the potential. Kelsey Tenety in Gisborne. It's just about getting them in the right places at the right time so that they can be seen.
Yeah, well, I'm sure with the likes of yourselves providing your experience and support, we're going to see more of that. But one of the things I'd like to talk about is, women in sport, leadership by women in sport, and some of the challenges that women may face around things like how women's sport is perceived in the media, maybe equity and funding. And then also, as we've just seen, it was lovely to have one of your tamariki join you. There's parenting responsibilities too. So it'd be good to have a kōrero around for women. There's some challenges that are there. How do you face up to them? How do you get through and be on the Olympic stage and be a role model to other young wahine toa who are coming through? What are your thoughts on that, either of you?
Yeah, I think, you've touched on all of the things that we've talked about previously. I was fortunate to be part of an Olympic women's leader program called WISLA. And one of the things we did was we talked about actually how are women perceived in the media. Classic example was in Rio, there was an article that went out on Gemma McCaw, for example, and actually her name featured once, but it was all about her husband, Richie. And so, but the stats coming out of Rio Olympics is that the media split was 50% women, 50% men, which is the first time it's ever happened. And I think women media agencies are starting to change that a lot now, because they are being told that actually women represent, exactly half of what should be covered. I still don't think we're getting enough women sports recognised out there. I think Sevens has certainly propelled a lot of that kind of change as well, because of how well they're doing on the world stage. But I think it's the minority sports that probably miss out a lot in that space. But I guess in terms of, and the last thing I was going to talk about was actually, I guess, is having children and being in sport. And I think netball do it really well. I think hockey have done it really well. When you do have your children and you decide that, well, certainly that's what happened for me in 2008. What was important for me is I needed to have my family support. So because actually I couldn't have done all the extra trainings or gone away to Auckland or to Hong Kong to prepare for an Olympic qualifier if I didn't have that family support. So I guess that's what was important to me at the time. But also Hockey New Zealand supported me in terms of my oldest daughter travelled with us to Hong Kong prior to going into the Beijing Olympics, and my mother-in-law travelled with me as well, and they were able to stay in the same hotel. So it's the NSOs that support those players with those, that have children, or that that extra support. So that was critical for me to succeed.
And for you, Ani, your thoughts on it around this?
I literally took what Nin just said, really. She took all the stuff that we spoke about before and said it all in one. But yeah, I think it's getting there. I mean, there's always, it could be more towards women's sport and just women in general in any sport. But I think that what the Blackfern Sevens have done, and, we're kind of getting there. But as Nin said, the minority sports we need to kind of look at that area. But yeah, I'll just leave it with that.
Yeah. Hey, look, fantastic. It's been really a pleasure to speak to both of you this morning. I'm really humbled by your being available to do this. Look, fantastic kōrero when you think of your journey coming from parts of the Bay of Plenty, Ruatoki, Wainua Mata to the Netherlands, Germany, and and then coming back around and talking about the impact and influence, role modelling to Wahine Toa coming through Māori hockey tournaments. I think that's fantastic. And then the bigger picture with all Wahine in sport, and how we can provide more profile, more support, and be able to get more of the positive messages, kōrero out there. So I want to thank you for being able to do that with me today on Mana Talanoa, Wahine Toa, Women in Sport. So ngā mihi nui kia kōrua, tēnei kōrero. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.
Tēnā koe, Andre.
Tēnā koe.